Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to the 10th lecture in the blockchain series. Till now we have studied what the blockchain is all about, what are its strengths, what does it bring, what does it do things, what is it, what does it do differently, and how all these features can be leveraged for benefit to make things faster, better, safer. We have seen applications in various areas. We also have seen examples how blockchain can be a disruptor in various technology in a positive way. So, all these are the positives of a blockchain. However, like all tools and technologies, in common with all tools, blockchains are vulnerable to attacks. There are certain drawbacks, there are certain weaknesses which can be exploited, there are certain drawbacks which make blockchains unsuitable for certain purposes, and there have been ways in which blockchain has been exploited to perpetrate frauds, scams and all. So, for those of us who are in management, along with the positives and strengths for which we can use, which we have to leverage blockchain in our businesses, we also need to be aware of various possible problems and attacks. So, today in we will take a brief look at most of them. They are vulnerable to attacks which can destroy the blockchain itself, or they can compromise its functions, make it function in ways different from what we intended. They can also be used to commit fraud and other crimes like with any other tool, and they have drawbacks or weaknesses which render them unsuitable for some applications. Blockchains are not a solution for all the problems. For some problems they are the ideal solution, for some they are unsuitable for those applications. So, the first category we will look at are attacks. Attacks are those actions by either ethical hackers or malicious hackers by means of which they can attack the blockchain itself and damage the blockchain, bring it down, make it work in ways different from what it was implemented. Blockchain started with the assumption that security is paramount. That is why they have implemented very strong encryption measures, very strong resilience measures, very strong recovery measures, and being distributed by nature, blockchains are immune to certain type of attacks. But having done all these things, over a period of times, certain weaknesses due to the design have emerged, and there have been many people who have tried to exploit those weaknesses to attack the blockchain itself. Blockchains implement strong security measures. However, each type of blockchain is vulnerable to different types of attacks. Sometimes we also call this attacking the system itself as hacking, and some we are going to cover in the next few slides. There are very many new ways of attacking blockchains are emerging, and new methods. It initially thought that blockchains are fairly attack proof, but new approaches, these approaches also are called attack vectors. They are being done. Sometimes they are being by ethical hackers to expose weaknesses in a blockchain, so the developers of that blockchain can take measures to cover that weakness. Some has been done by unethical people to exploit a blockchain and commit fraud and crime and all. And these have been grouped. There have been many studies still emerging. So, this is a very emerging area. On a general basis, they have been grouped into 4 categories. One is called peer-to-peer network based attacks. You know, blockchain is a peer-to-peer network, that is, all the nodes theoretically in a public permissionless blockchain have the same rights. So, and how do they, and all of them have a copy of the blockchain database, and all of them take part in approving changes, making additions to blockchain. How do they do that? They do it by synchronizing with all the other peers. If one node wants to submit a transaction, the transaction gets propagated to all the blockchains. They all jointly through some various consensus mechanism approve that change. Once that change goes into that particular node, it gets all the other nodes will call and get a copy of the database to update their database. Either they make a call and get it from that node, that node sends it to all the nodes that it is familiar with, those nodes send it to all the other nodes that they are in touch with. That over a period of time, depending on the speed of the network, by contacts between peer to peer networks contacting their peers, the blockchain reaches a steady state. All the nodes in the blockchain have a same copy of the blockchain database. So, this characteristic of blockchains interacting with each other, synchronizing with each other, either sending information out or calling somebody else for information, this kind of peer to peer network and the communication, network communication has been exploited to mount certain kinds of attacks. Obviously, it starts from one point and gets spreads over a network. That characteristic has been, there is no central authority in blockchain. It has to, all the communication happens by peer to peer nodes communicating with each other. This characteristic has been exploited to mount certain kinds of attacks. So, they are put as peer to peer network attacks. Second type of attacks are what are called as consensus and ledger based attacks. We know that all blockchains, they grow, they maintain themselves by means of some consensus mechanism. They update the ledger, they keep it up to date based on a consensus based mechanism. Depending on which type of consensus used, certain attacks have been developed to attack a blockchain. Then there are blockchains based on attacking the smart contract. This essentially goes back to another weakness of a blockchain itself. There has been one example, we will look at that. And there are those what are called wallet based attacks. Blockchains by themselves can be self contained, like the big Bitcoin blockchain can exist by itself, but to convert Bitcoin, to make it tradable with other currencies, outside parties like wallets also work on top of blockchains. For example, many people who want to trade Bitcoin into say dollars go to one of these exchanges. The exchanges keep these Bitcoins in what are called cryptographic wallets, and they have been attacked, they have been compromised in various ways. So, the fourth categories are called wallet based attacks. The first type of peer to peer network attack is what is called a eclipse attack. This is a kind of attack where a malicious node, all the nodes are controlled by different individuals. One node, the owner of that node who has malicious intention, blocks off one other node, one or limited number of nodes. So, it eclipses that particular node. How does it do that? The eclipse attacks are based on attacking one node in a peer network, and the nodes in a blockchain, as I just explained, they synchronize with the net, they synchronize with the whole, they make the whole blockchain in equilibrium by connecting to a small set of nodes. If I am a node, obviously I have no idea, especially in public blockchains, I have no idea how many other nodes are there. So, what do? I keep a small list of nodes with whom I communicate. So, I send a communication to node A, it responds and gives me that information, I will add that to my list. I send it to B, B does not respond, I do not put B. Now, I go to C, it responds, I put C. So, over a period of time, depending on how much I communicate with them and what is the response that I am getting from them, depending on these two factors, every node keeps a small list of nodes it uses to synchronize itself. It is practically impossible to keep a list of all, and depending on when it responded, I update very slowly. So, on malicious node, how, for example, if I have built a list of 10 nodes in contact based on what is the most recent response I got, then if somebody sends me response from lot of responses deliberately, lot of communication from 10 different nodes, over a period of time, my trusted 10 bit, there is no formal trust, I trust because I have got communication from them, they all get replaced by this bunch of communication coming from this malicious node. That person creates a list of bogus nodes and sends communication from each of them. So, over a period of time, all my list of nodes that I trust gets replaced by these malicious nodes. At this point, the attacker who has created all these bogus nodes to send communications to me essentially controls all the communication that I am getting and I am sending. So, the attacker can control that, and they can use it for various attacks, like essentially what that attacker has done by replacing my list of nodes with his list of malicious nodes that he has created artificially, a bogus nodes, is that that particular malicious attacker has isolated me from the network. So, what he can do, the kind of things that that attacker can do, for example, if we take Bitcoin for example or any other currency, the attacker can send me a Bitcoin to buy something from me. So, I agree, approve, get that Bitcoin, send that, whatever the goods and services we have contracted. Now, when I send out this transaction to be validated and entered, this attacker is controlling all the communication from me. He can block it so that the network does not know that this transaction has happened, that I have received one Bitcoin and I have sent some items. Remember, what has to happen is I will send this transaction out, the network validates the rest of the other nodes, and the entry goes in, changing the Bitcoin from that attacker to me. It does not happen now. So, now the attacker is free to use the same Bitcoin with somebody else. At any point, if the attacker takes me away and brings me back into the network, when I send this communication again, the transaction has already happened with somebody else. So, my transaction will get rejected as not valid. Remember, they are all based on timestamps. My timestamp is older than the current timestamp, gets rejected. So, in a eclipse attack, that is how it happens. A malicious attacker eclipses one node and victimizes that node with various transactions. Typically, most contacted nodes are chosen for a new contact. The attacker replaces the victim's list with bogus or compromised nodes. Attacker spawns a bunch of bogus nodes on the system. They constantly keep sending me communication which replaces my current trusted list, and now all of my communication will go through only these. So, that list will never change, because I am only allowed to all my transaction, all my communication is going through these, and they are controlling the whole thing. It controls all access point to victim node, and once that is done, he can use it for activities like double spending. I am getting victimized because I have done a transaction which the chain will reject later. So, this is one type of node called an eclipse attack. The second type of attack is what is called a Sybil attack or Sybil attacks. Both this is also remember, these are all exploiting the characteristics of operating in a distributed synchronized network. So, in case of Sybil attacks, not just one node, whole network may be attacked, entire peer to peer network can be attacked. Let us see how it happens. The malicious user or malicious node creates lots of bogus nodes. One may think it may not be possible, but it has been shown. It has happened to Bitcoin also. There is an example where we will see in the end. The malicious user creates lot of bogus nodes. These nodes feed malicious data to good nodes. There are now in this network, all the nodes are not equal now. There are some nodes which are malicious, which are bent on doing a harm. They keep sending a flood of communications to the good nodes, which we do not know that these are malicious nodes. So, they respond back. The good nodes are unable to distinguish between communication coming from a good node or a fellow peer good node or communication coming from a malicious node, and over a period of time, since these malicious nodes are meant to send bogus communications, that communication overwhelms all the communication coming from the good nodes, and now all the good nodes now over a period of time, they slowly change their communication list, the list of nodes they can contact to these malicious nodes. At this point, the malicious user pretty much controls all the communication happening. Not easy, but has been proven to happen. And once the attacker gains control over the peer group for every node, he can control all the communications and mount various kinds of attack like double spending, going back and wiping transactions or making corrective transactions in the future. So, all these kinds of attacks are possible here, but it requires a lot of computing power. And to do this, obviously attacking one node like in the case of an eclipse mode is far easier than attacking the whole network, but the possibility of creating bogus nodes and trying to do something malicious has already happened. It has been demonstrated. There was one famous case called a Chainalysis incident. There was this blockchain analysis company in Switzerland. Apparently, this company created 250 bogus nodes on Bitcoin. It is a big number, given the number of nodes, creating 250 bogus nodes. Now, with so many nodes in place, it can probably overwhelm the whole network. It was found and dismantled. One protection is the proof of work algorithm, consensus algorithm can make such attacks tough to execute, because to create a node Remember, how do we get on a node? By mining a block. If I were to get into the Bitcoin system as a valid user, I can download the software, I can start mining, but I won't get recognized as a node till I do mining successfully and I purchase, I own Bitcoins. So, in a proof of work algorithm, creating a node requires a lot of effort. We have seen. It requires a lot of computing effort, lot of power, lot of time. So, to create every node, this malicious user has to expend so many resources, so which may not make it cost effective, or at least proof of work algorithms can significantly reduce the chance of a civil attack. Still there is a theoretical possibility, especially possible in small networks. If there are small number of small networks, it is easy to overwhelm the current list of nodes. So, this is the second kind of peer to peer attacks. The third attack is what is called a selfish mining attack. This is an interesting way of attacking, and again has been proven to be possible, though there not have been too many incidences. What the attacker does in this case, attacker is part of the blockchain, he mines the blocks, the attacker mines the blocks successfully, correct block, but does not submit them. So, he mines this block, does not submit it, mines the next block, submit it. If it is possible that over a period of time, the attacker has mined more blocks than what is there on the blockchain already, period of time. At this point, what the attacker does is presents his mined chain to the blockchain for consensus. Remember, the existing block is actually shorter than the existing extension to the block is shorter than what this attacker has done, and by consensus we know that whenever there is a fork, whenever there is a branch in the blockchain, the longer chain prevails. So, the set of the chain of blocks mined by the malicious user gets accepted. So, the blockchain grows along. Remember, the blocks that he has mined are legitimate blocks, they are not illegitimate blocks. He has mined more, so he can force the blockchain to fork into his group rather than what have been added already, they all get discarded. Before he does that, what he does is he goes to the, before he presents his chain, goes to the current block, does n number of transactions, and now when he presents his chain for forking, the blockchain forks along this line, all the other transactions get discarded. So, he can essentially wipe out all the transactions he has done. Like he can promise, he might put a smart contract to buy certain items from certain people, he gets those items, before it delivers he presents and wipes out those transactions, or he borrows coins from somebody, enters that in some form, gets wiped out. So, this is one more type of mining attack called selfish mining attack. There are some more variants of it called Finney attack and other types of attacks, but they are all based on this principle. So, attacker mines blocks but does not publish. Once he gains lead over real chain, publishes his longer chain. Chain forks, since his list of blocks is longer, provides a window of opportunity to commit acts such as double spend on the original chain, and he can reverse those transactions. This becomes very clear if I can actually write and show this cut. So, let us see pictorially how the selfish mining attack works. We know there is the genesis block, block 1, block 2, block 3. So, at this point the blockchain will continue. What the malicious user will do, so at this point the miner will mine block number 3. It is a legitimate block, but will not submit it. Next he mines block number 4. Next he mines block number 5. He does block number 5 by the time the chain is still on block number 4. The other miners, he has not submitted any of these. What has been submitted, the blockchain has gone up to block number 4. What he does at this point is he submits his chain for approval. Now remember, in consensus, whenever there is a branch like this, the longest branch, if everybody agrees that the longest branch is legitimate, the blockchain will grow along these lines. So, what happens when he submits during the consensus process, the block will, this will get approved, the block will grow this way, these two blocks will get discarded. So, meanwhile, before that happens, remember consensus takes some time, he goes and makes n number of transactions here. He purchases things for which he does not give, he promises and collects coins from others which he does not submit later. When he submits his block, the blockchain will go this way, and these blocks along with the transactions, I am sorry, the extra transactions will be in a new block here which is need to be mined, they all get rejected. So, these transactions which are in the existing blocks get rejected, and these transactions which he has done also get wiped out. So, now all the transactions will go along this line. Neat point to remember is these are legitimate blocks, they are exactly the same, they are not been presented, that is all. So, he uses this quirk to make the blockchain go this way and forget all the transactions which have happened elsewhere. So, this is one way he can also may take advantage of the consensus mechanism, the delay in the consensus mechanism to commit fraud or any other malicious act. So, that is how a selfish mining attack is executed. So, let us look at the next type of attack, something called a mining malware attack. This also comes under the category of consensus mechanism and mining based attacks. Malware is a piece of software which is exists on a computer, my computer, your computer, anybody, which we may not be aware of. It is a piece of legitimate software which may have been illegally downloaded. There are many types of malware, and today these more than viruses, these are the big menace in the computing world today. It is possible that all of our computers, since we are always on the internet, we are always connected, not necessarily the best safety measures, many of us do not have firewalls for example, malicious users across the world are using that capability to download malware, this piece of software, into our systems which we are not aware that they are running. At the simplest, what they do is they can keep track of all the sites that we visit. If it turns out that I visit all sites which sell soap, then they will sell this information to soap companies and they will start sending ads to my browser. So, they may monitor what we are visiting, what we are doing, and use it for advertising purposes. That is relatively benign. I may get spam mail, I may get offers which I had no idea I was signed up for. In more serious cases, malware can monitor the keys what I am typing. There are those what are called keyloggers, and they can catch my password. When I go to a website and if the password file or the password field has not been camouflaged correctly internally, if whatever I type, these keyloggers can capture my password, silently send using my own internet connection to whoever has downloaded the software, and they can use it to compromise my site, steal money from my account, steal my credit card number. So, that is what is malware. It is a piece of software downloaded without my knowledge, without my approval, which is monitoring and doing all these bad activities. Similar thing can be used in the case of a blockchain also. So, in a sense, a malware attack on a blockchain is not strictly an attack on the blockchain, it is an attack on the node from an external source. The attack is not coming from the blockchain or on the blockchain, the attack is coming from a malware which is coming from some other source. So, malware on unsuspecting computers on the internet, what they do most of the cases, they hijack computing power for mining. They may not be able to do anything to the blockchain itself because it requires my identity and things like that. However, they may hijack my computing for their mining purposes. Remember, mining, especially in proof of work algorithms like Bitcoin, requires enormous amount of mining power. So, if somebody sends out a grid of malware, whole host of malware, there are operating systems which enable such a thing, that they can take care of computing power on somebody else's computer, and if that person can capture the computing power of say 1 million computers, he can successfully do mining far better than somebody who has put up 10,000 computers for legitimate mining. So, malware attacks typically help in illegally using unsuspecting computers to help the culprit do mining. So, as I said, it is not strictly a attack on the blockchain itself, but it takes advantage of this consensus mechanism to make it faster by taking advantage of unsuspecting computers. So, it reduces the cost of mining for the attacker. One solution that all of us need to keep in mind, not just things, so malware can be doing it for so many things. Our computers may have been hijacked when in the night, for example, if I leave my system on, it could be hijacked by some people trying to crack password files elsewhere. They may hijack the power of my computer to steal credit card numbers from some other source. So, the safest solution is before you, when you are not using the system, either in the night or when you travel and places like that, turn it off. That is one good solution for any malware attack, also for malware attacks on the blockchain. Let us look at the next type. This is a known attack called a 51% attack. It is theoretically possible, it has not happened. There have been cases where it has come close to happening, and this is the most well known attack. Everyone, when you talk about blockchain mechanism and blockchains, this is the most common attack which surfaces. It is mostly applicable to proof of work algorithms. Remember, it is the most well known attack. In proof of work or any consensus mechanism, how does consensus happen? When more than the majority of the participants, majority of the nodes agree that that particular transaction is a valid transaction, that particular block is a valid block in mining. So, and the assumption has been that in all distributed networks, the computing power is also distributed. So, no one person controls all the nodes, controls all the computing power, and the rate at which somebody mines is dependent on how much computing power they have. Since it is distributed, all the players have a rough chance of being able to mine a node and present it for addition. Here what happens, if in a network, what if one player or a group of players have such enormous computing power that they control 51% or higher of the computing power. The computing power in a blockchain is called hash rate. So, it is assumed that hash rate is distributed over all the nodes. So, all the nodes have a fair chance of attaining consensus because they all vote after that. However, in a case if one player or a group of players control 51% of the computing power, 51% of the hash rate, they control 51% of the nodes, they always generate more mines quickly, and they can always vote themselves. They control 51% of the computing, they mine the fastest, and they can also manage the consensus. And so, now the blockchain essentially is taken over by this group of people who own 51% of the hash rate on a blockchain. So, at that point onwards, it is almost like the other 49% of the nodes, 49 or less, are pretty much ineffective. These people can go back, they can delete a block, they can go rewrite transactions because they control the power. They can go back, remember, they can go back to a previous block, change the transaction, mine everything, block everybody else, mine the next blocks, add them to the block, add them to the blockchain, discard the old blocks. They can do double spending, all kinds of things are possible if one user or a group of users control 51% of the attack, and this is theoretically possible. It is proven. I mean, it is pretty much common sense also that those who control the majority of the nodes, majority of the hash rate, can control the node itself. And theoretically it has not happened, but there have been cases, yes, even in the case of Bitcoin, that the computing power of one single party has approached these limits, and as we can see, it is far easier to execute on smaller networks because the requisite computing power also is lesser compared to a much bigger network like a Bitcoin network. So, it is the most well known attack. In the proof of work consensus algorithm, assumption is that mining power or hash rate is widely distributed. If one miner or a group of miners accumulates 51% of total hash rate, it can gain control over the consensus mechanism. Pretty much all transactions happen by consensus, these people control the consensus. So, this party can reverse transactions, prevent valid transactions, double spend, do anything, do any such activity permitted on the blockchain. Possibility is remote, but theoretically possible, easier in a smaller network. and this is also one of the most discussed attacks. And the last in this category, consensus mechanism, is what is called a time jack attack. It is very similar to eclipse attack. Also let us go back and remember, in a distributed network like a blockchain, distributed ledger like a blockchain, how are transactions added or discarded, how are they validated? Based on the timestamp. That means, if I sell you something and get a Bitcoin from you and submit it to the whole group for approval by consensus, there is a time stamped on it. If somebody later comes back and says 5 seconds later with the same Bitcoin saying that I have bought it from this customer, since my timestamp is earlier than yours, my transaction goes in, your transaction gets rejected. That is how it should be, right? If I have contracted to gain a Bitcoin from a party, first that party no longer owns that Bitcoin, it is in my name, even though it might not have gone in, and if anybody subsequently claims that they also have the same Bitcoin, it is not a valid transaction. So, validation is done by looking at the timestamp on the transaction, timestamp on the block, everything, and this timestamp is maintained by synchronizing the time among all the nodes in the network. All the nodes talk to each other and make sure that they are on a common time scale, time frame, or the exact time they matches in each of the nodes. Similar to an eclipse attack, if a malicious user can go and change the time on a victim node, that is, move it forward or move it backwards preferably by sending all time communication, bombards that node with a different time than what the node already has. Since the node constantly keeps maintaining and all the other nodes, all the communication it is getting from all these malicious nodes, say the time is something different, the time on that particular node changes. Now, let us say it has been changed 5 minutes back. So, this malicious user can do a transaction saying that I give you something, you send me one Bitcoin, or you send me some item or do me some service, I will give you a Bitcoin, and now the timestamp on that transaction between these two parties is behind the timestamp which has already gone in and validated. So, when this user submits this transaction, the victim user submits the transaction to the network, gets discarded. It is a valid transaction, legitimate transaction, gets discarded because this malicious user has changed the timestamp on the victim node. Now, the malicious user is free to do the same transaction, use the same Bitcoin with somebody else, the classic double spending problem. So, this is similar to an eclipse attack. This typically is done on one set of nodes, not necessarily possible on the entire node. In fact, imagine what happens when the malicious user changes in the entire node, then the transactions the malicious users get rejected. So, it does not make sense. Okay. So, one more called a race attack on consensus mechanism. It is very similar to selfish mining attack. In this case, the attacker submits his transaction to a merchant. He does a transaction with the merchant, but does not broadcast this transaction. Then he makes another transaction and submits that with the same coin. He makes a transaction with this merchant, submits that, does not submit, makes another transaction with the same coin. Since that was submitted first, that gets accepted. When the merchant submits his transaction for other part of the validation to change the name of the Bitcoin, it gets rejected because another transaction has gone in with a earlier number. This is done deliberately. In most cases of smart contracts with valid nodes, this is done automatically. The transaction moment it happens, smart contract fires, transmission goes, but here malicious users controls that. He does not submit. He sends the transaction to the merchant, but not to the network, and thus another transaction sends that gets accepted, this gets rejected. That is how executes double spending. So, all these attacks attack the blockchain itself, compromise the functioning of the blockchain. So, that is why they are known as attacks. Smart contract based attacks. An example where a smart contract is compromised. This happened, this is also another famous attack, it is called the DAO attack, called Distributed Autonomous Organization. Again, this is a sort of not necessarily an attack on the blockchain itself, but taking advantage of one of the quirks in the blockchain. It happened when a third party used Ethereum for a crowdfunding effort for an initial coin offering, we will see that a bit later. The third party used it for Ethereum for a crowdfunding effort. An attacker noticed a bug, that is, and the Ethereum Alliance, Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, when he noticed the bug and started misusing it, it took this alliance some time to fix it. The bug was there in the open, but as with all blockchains, things have to happen by consensus. So, by the time they could develop a fix and gain the consensus of all other users, it took some significant time, during which the attacker could continue his fraud or the attack. So, what he did, he noticed a bug and he made a small contribution and became a node to the fundraising effort, and he exploited this bug in the Ethereum consensus mechanism, Ethereum smart contract, to make a large withdrawal. So, a lot of people were contributing funding to this particular crowdfunding effort, whereas this one particular user is taking money out of that for his own effort. So, the alliance members noticed it and they developed a bug, but this attacker had already stolen enough money. They developed a solution for fixing the bug, but by then this attacker, since it takes time for consensus, the attacker had already withdrawn enough money. So, what Ethereum had to do was that to invalidate these transactions, remember, when there is a fork, only one becomes valid, the other gets rejected, discarded. So, Ethereum Alliance forced a fork, they forced a fork on the Ethereum blockchain. So, it went along a different line. All the transactions done by this particular user got discarded, but for a time there were actually two Ethereum chains. So, this is another famous attack where the smart contract, a bug in a smart contract was noticed and exploited by a malicious user, and even when he was actually committing the crime, nobody could do anything because bug was had not been accepted by consensus. So, again one other feature of the blockchain being exploited by a malicious user. Then there is another class of attacks which are called routing attacks. It is discussed in literature, but it is actually not easy to do in the case of a blockchain. It is essentially what is similar to what is called a man in the middle attack. In IT, in computing field, in security, we have something called a man in the middle attack. Say I send you a message to you, remember from the first day of cryptography, I send a message to you saying that you have passed. This transmission, if it is not encrypted or if somebody can break the encryption, a third party in the middle between you and me and you can intercept the message, change that from pass to fail, then send it back to you. So, you think that I have sent you a message saying that you have failed, whereas actually what I have sent is that you have passed. So, there is a man in the middle who intercepts the message, changes it and sends it. This is called the man in the middle attack. So, theoretically it is possible on a blockchain also. So, what the attacker does is the attacker intercepts the messages, tampers with them and broadcasts, but it is not easy to execute because of the distributed nature of the blockchain. So, in the blockchain, if I want to send you a message, I have to actually broadcast it to the network. So, it goes through various nodes and then reaches you. So, it is possible that one of the nodes I am sending it to is a malicious user. He takes my message, intercepts it, changes it and sends to you, but simultaneously you will be getting the same message from so many other nodes. So, by consensus this may get discarded and the correct message will reach you. So, implementing a routing attack on a blockchain is not easy, but it may still be possible if combined with Eclipse attacks. If that user has already mounted a Eclipse attack, then naturally he will be controlling all the access to your node, then he can do a man in the middle attack with any message that comes to you, not just one message. So, this is one more attack which is discussed, and each of these above attacks depend on exploiting a feature or a vulnerability in the design or implementation of the blockchain. The consensus mechanism is a feature of the blockchain, whereas a bug in the smart contract is a problem in the vulnerability in the implementation, whether it is on the blockchain feature or a vulnerability in the implementation. These attacks attack them and make the blockchain ineffective. They break them, they make them work in ways which is not intended to work, and various groups, various organizations, various alliances, consortia, which are working, are constantly working to eliminate these attacks. As they come up with new fixes, new features, new approaches also are being evolved or discovered by all these malicious users, by all these criminals. So, it keeps going on. We add new features, we close the past bugs, new bugs will come up. So, this is something that all users must be aware of, that they are fairly impregnable. None of the attacks I mentioned, as for those who are not technical, you must be wondering what I am talking about. They are not easy to execute. It takes a very high level of skills, in knowledge, brilliance and computing power to do them, but they are possible. If they are executed, we know that they can cause severe damage. So, whenever we leverage blockchains, it is better to be aware that such attack is possible. If it happens, what are the countermeasures we can take? For example, one thing might be to shut it down temporarily till we fix it, things like that. So, that is one reason why I have spent some time on explaining all these technical attacks which are possible on a blockchain. The next category is fraud. Fraud is not necessarily compromising the blockchain itself, but blockchain has to exist in an ecosystem. They work with smart contracts, they work with exchanges, they work with the third parties outside. They may even be storing their data in a cloud. For example, a blockchain may be executing, may be working on all the nodes, but the central, especially in case of private blockchains, it may be hosted on a cloud. So, in all these cases, in all the instances where blockchain interacts with other systems outside world, at those interfaces it can be compromised. For example, let us go back to delivering pizza with a smart contract. Remember how it is done? I send you a smart contract saying that I would like to buy pizza. We agree upon the price, set up the smart contract. Then the seller goes to the blockchain and verifies that I have the required amount of currency. Then the seller gives the pizza to the delivery boy, who after delivery scans the barcode. That is proof that pizza has been delivered to me. Then the smart contract fires, automatically deducts the money from my account, deposits to your account. So, now if the delivery boy gives the pizza to somebody else or consumes it himself and nevertheless scans the barcode, then the smart contract will still fire. So, blockchain has not been compromised, it is working as it is, but the interface where the barcode has to be scanned, the fraud has happened there. This is fraud. This is an example of compromising the system to commit a crime. So, frauds are malicious or criminal activities that happen around a block or around a blockchain. The blockchain itself is not attacked. Acts may be due to negligence, exploiting a vulnerability, or just plain fraudulent or criminal activity. In this case of delivery of a pizza, there is no vulnerability, just a plain fraud. He did not give me the pizza, he consumed it himself. So, in this there are three varieties of frauds which can happen leveraging a blockchain, using a blockchain. ICO related scams are frauds, exchange or wallet related scams are frauds, or plain various other kinds of frauds. Let us look at these three categories. One group of frauds that can happen is what are called ICO frauds. ICO stands for initial coin offering. That is, it is a very popular crowdfunding method to raise funds, especially for blockchain efforts. Suppose I am developing blockchain for some particular purpose, or maybe even to launch a new cryptocurrency. How do I gain funds? In the normal method, in the venture capitalist world, there are various investors, venture capitalists and angel investors and various public agencies who lend us money to execute our idea, implement our idea, and they get paid back in the form of shares or stake in the company. So, in this case, let us say I want to launch a blockchain for one particular kind of cryptocurrency. So, in case of initial coin offering, what I do is I do collect funds and issue them in the form of coins. I am launching a blockchain for a cryptocurrency. So, I start with it, I issue coins for free for the first initial investors. So, that is why it is called a initial coin offering. Subsequent investors in the subsequent users of the blockchain, they will have to acquire the coins in some other way. They can buy it using fiat money with existing owners of these coins. They may do mining, so many other activities depending on the design of the blockchain. So, when I design the blockchain for this new cryptocurrency, for this effort which takes, I can raise the funds through crowdfunding by accepting money from various people and issuing those people the first set of coins. So, that is why it is called initial coin offering. So, there have been many frauds on that itself. For example, I may put up a website saying that please do make your contribution. For all these entries that I am taking to this contribution, I will issue coins through my blockchain. So, funds are coming to a website because it has to go into a bank account. The return is coming in the form of coins in the blockchain. There have been cases where various hackers and other malicious users, they have set up fake sites or they have hijacked this site. They have hijacked this site so that all the traffic coming to this site gets diverted to another site. So, all the money being sent, which we think is going towards this blockchain effort, is getting diverted to the hacker's account. That is a fraud which is leveraging the process of ICO, not necessarily the blockchain itself. So, the sites have been hijacked to divert funds. There may be fake ICOs that legitimate mimic a legitimate ICO. I may call my bank. I am starting an online bank. I am starting a blockchain based bank. I will call it as crypto bank, and I start an ICO for this. Somebody starts another ICO, cryptocurrency bank, similar name with maybe has similar logo and all those things. When I advertise to users saying that I am starting this cryptocurrency bank, invest, I am doing an ICO, the other party also, people may not notice the difference between crypto and cryptocurrency. You have to be careful with these little things, and people may be wrongly contributing to that fake account, thinking that they are contributing to a legitimate account. So, the entire ICO in that case, my ICO is legitimate, but there is another ICO going in parallel which is completely fake. It is a scam which is piggybacking on my effort. Such things have happened, and ICO itself may be a scam. There may be only one ICO being done, and if the party starting the ICO takes the money and runs away, there is very little we can do. Again, the blockchain is not compromised. The parties running this system of ICO may be perpetrating the fraud. So, one class of frauds are possible through ICOs. The biggest group of frauds that are happening are through what are called exchanges or wallet frauds. Even in the cases that we have heard in India, there is one big case in Delhi, I forget the name, that happened due to fraud at the wallet or the exchange level. Let us see what it is. Cryptocurrency exchanges enable trading the cryptocurrencies against each other and also against fiat currencies. There are various exchanges, Mt. Gox, GoCoin, this coin, various so many things, and we will see one case next called Quadra. What they do, these are the people who convert say bitcoins into dollars. They can convert bitcoins into Ethereum and Ethereum to Ripple. They all act like currency exchanges. So, if I need to convert my bitcoins, I submit my bitcoins, my keys. Remember, cryptocurrency is nothing but a private key which proves that I own that with my details on it. I submit it to them. They store it in a device called a wallet, a cryptographic wallet. It could be a software file or it could be a hardware based file, and they take the responsibility. If say if I want to sell my bitcoins to some other party for dollars, they take the responsibility of collecting dollars from that party, depositing it to my account, changing the name on my private key to that party. So, do the transactions, and in the process they will be holding my keys. It is called holding my keys in custody, and the assumption is that they will not do anything tampering with that. They do things in good faith. So, at that point my currency is in their hands. They will do the transaction on my behalf on the Bitcoin blockchain. So, many such exchanges offer secure wallets to hold coins in a custodial function. Till a buyer is found for my bitcoins, they will be with the exchange. I may even say hold it till and sell it only if the rate of bitcoin goes above $8,000. So, today it may be 7,000, it may take 2 weeks, 3 weeks for it to reach that 8,000. So, at that time my keys will be, my bitcoins will be with the exchange. So, those exchange wallets where they are supposedly stored in a safe manner, they have been hacked. Somebody has hacked into them and stolen these keys, and essentially means that they have the rights to those bitcoins, change the name to themselves, stolen my bitcoins. They have not stolen it from me, they have stolen it from the exchange. Keys in custody have been lost by accident or negligence. I have surrendered all my keys to this exchange for custodial keeping. There have been cases where that system has crashed, they have not kept a copy, so my currency is lost. There was one case of an exchange called Mt. Gox. They lost bitcoin keys worth 150 million by not storing them properly. So, that is by negligence, but a fraud nevertheless, because people lose the value of their cryptocurrency. Many people have lost their entire savings. Somebody may steal the key from me by phishing, go to the exchange and change my name. There have been cases where employees of the exchange have stolen the keys. They have access to the keys. They can go and change since they have it in a custodial manner, they can change the ownership. They have stolen the keys, either sold it to somebody or changed it to their name or whatever by insiders. So, this is an absolute criminal fraud. It has been done by people who work for the exchange itself. And in some cases, it is theoretically possible that a third party encrypts the wallet again. The wallet should not be encrypted by any other party except by the exchange. A third party has gotten hold of the wallet, they may not be able to break the wallet, but have re-encrypted with their key and said that unless you give us X amount of money, we will not release it back to you. This is holding them for ransom, encryption for ransom. So, there are various kinds of scams happening around. In fact, bulk of the scams we hear about various cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ether and all, bulk of them are happening at the wallet and the exchange level, something to be mindful of when we trade in all these currencies. And let us close with scams and frauds with a fairly recent case, very strange case. There was this Canadian company called Quadriga, which was the biggest cryptocurrency exchange in Canada. It had assets worth going to hundreds of millions of dollars. The founder of this company came to India last December and died. And he died, apparently he came to India for working on some charity to start an orphanage in Jaipur. He died due to some disease. And what happened afterwards, it was discovered that this exchange had cryptocurrencies from various users. They had deposited their cryptocurrencies in this exchange, and this company was guaranteeing them that we do not store them on the computer, we store them in a hardware device called a cold wallet. So, that device, those currencies become available only when the device is attached to the laptop or a computer. So, online hacking is not possible because they are not on the system all the time, only when the device is attached they become available. So, that is the guarantee it was giving. So, it grew up to a very popular exchange in Canada, the biggest exchange in Canada. When he died, it turned out that his widow claimed that only he had the keys to open all these exchanges. So, he died and he did not leave a copy. He had the keys, the secret keys, the encryption keys to open all these wallets, the cold wallets, and he died taking all the keys with him. So, the cryptocurrency, about $270 million of cryptocurrency was lost. It appears that many of them had put their entire life savings into this company, they were lost, and subsequently when an auditing company did a forensic audit, they were able to open some of these wallets, cold wallets, and they discovered that these wallets were all empty. So, is it possible that he had spent all the money? He had spent all the money that belongs to other users? Is it possible that he, again nothing to do with blockchain, currency has come from blockchain, it has gone to a wallet, even the wallets might have been secure, the person owning the wallet himself might have committed a fraud. In fact, there have been speculation on the internet, I mean we cannot trust everything that comes on the internet, but there have been sites like Reddit and other sites where some people are speculating faked his own death to save his own all the currency that he might have lost elsewhere. So, such things also are possible, that it's like the guards themselves are stealing. We entrust our money to some party and that party himself has committed fraud, and this is again nothing to do with blockchain, it is plain and simple fraud. It's prosecutable and punishable in various countries, but such a thing has happened. Very strange case of this company called Quadriga. Those who are interested, please do read, it happens very recently. There are a lot of news items, it is still evolving, the case is still not gone. His wife in fact has gone to courts to force the auditors to give her the keys. Some keys have been available, she has gone to court to get custodial access of those keys. It will be interesting to see what happens in the near future, something we should keep a watch on. So, this is about attacks and scams. Other than this, other than attacks and scams which are malicious activities, blockchain itself has some drawbacks. Some of it is due to the way it is the way it is supposed to work. Some of the strengths that blockchain offers, remember, transparent establishment of trust, distributed nature, distributed consensus, then traceability, unchangeable record of transactions, all these are strengths of a blockchain. But in some situations, some of these features may become drawbacks also. Let us take a look at some of them. The very first one, immutability. Transactions once entered, once validated and entered into a block legitimately cannot be changed retrospectively. That is the feature of a blockchain. But this makes it difficult for certain applications. So, yesterday we looked at application of blockchain for identity. Wonderful. I have one source to keep all my identities. I do not need to have a separate driver's license, separate voter's ID, separate Aadhaar, separate PAN card. If I want to change my address in all these cards, I go and change on one place in the blockchain, all these different identities of mine get address changed. If I want to change the spelling of my name, I do not have to change the spelling of my name in all these registers, all these identities, I just go do it on the blockchain, does. But the problem, as we have seen, that there may be instances like the example I gave. I received a speeding ticket 8 years back. After 2 years, the record of those speeding tickets should be wiped out. Then they should be forgotten. But blockchain does not let me do that. We cannot go back and change that. So, then I have to go and make an entry that 10 years back I received a speeding ticket, it is invalid from today. But for any other party, it is visible that I got 2 speeding tickets 10 years back. I cannot get it wiped off my record. So, an insurance company also will come to know even after 10 years. So, it is a problem, this capability to not being able to change, while it is a good feature in many cases, also happens to be a drawback for many applications. And second problem with blockchain is that, let us say we have a blockchain running for identities or keeping some records for lot of period. Some requirements may change, which may require a big change to the way the blockchain itself works. But making modifications to a blockchain is not easy. One, while we are making the blockchain, modifications to the blockchain, current process will continue even though requirements might have changed. And secondly, making a change means forking the blockchain. If we modify anything in the blockchain, we have to fork it to follow a new path. Transactions that are happening in the interim get wiped out, they get discarded. So, making a change, fixing a bug is not easy. That is one of the next things I showed and next things I am talking about. So, making a modification, even a legitimate modification, to reflect the changes of requirements. In a regular IT system, it is fairly easy. We make change to the code, stop it for a day, put the new code in, out and running. It works without any problem with new rules applied from that point. And any changes we have backed up, we can restore and make applicable over the new rules. Blockchain, that is far more difficult. And the next drawback, fixing bugs. As we have seen in the case of DAO attacks, when bugs are discovered, it takes time. It takes time to make the change, fix the bug, make the modifications and propagate it thanks to the consensus mechanism. During that time, somebody can still take advantage and commit fraudulent acts on the blockchain. So, that is the third big issue, that is fixing bugs and making upgrades. It is not easy because it takes time, and during that transition period, the changes that are being made are visible to everyone before they take effect, and reason for making the changes also are visible, and somebody can take advantage of the interim gap. The next issue is complexity and related scalability. Blockchains are complex by nature because they try to do so many things. For a blockchain to work, so many components have to work. The identity system has to work, that peer-to-peer sharing system has to work, the synchronization has to work, the consensus mechanism has to work, and the capability of mining and not being able to, the effort required for mining should be feasible, and doable. And once the chain is set, it should be propagated, distributed to everyone. Once the blockchain is up and ready, it should not be changeable, it should be immutable. If a change has to happen, the forking mechanism has to work properly as intended. So many things have to, the databases supporting the system have to work correctly. They have to be complex enough to handle this data. So, for a blockchain to work, it involves so many parts, or as we say in terminology, it involves so many moving parts. So, by nature blockchains are complex. So, if my needs are very trivial, very small, a simple database system or something based on a spreadsheet like Excel might be sufficient. So, before we use a blockchain, we need to consider this fact that the blockchains are complex by nature, and developing and implementing them takes significant amount of effort. So, unless we are able to quantify the benefit and that exceeds the amount of effort we are going to put, the complexity of blockchain will be an issue. And second, not only are they complex, they involve a lot of resources to run. They require a lot of computing power to run also. So, can they be universally spread to everyone when people have different levels of computing skills? For example, if somebody with a smartphone, can blockchain run on a smartphone's capabilities? So, can we scale it up? If a blockchain, most of the experiments or most of the pilot projects we saw, especially in the public sector yesterday, are for users like 1000 users, 2000 users. The example of a grid in Bangladesh had 100 users, 200 users. If we scale it up to 1 million users, or in a case like India, if we want to put Aadhaar on the blockchain, we need to put almost 1.3 billion records on the blockchain, and we need to have potentially 1.3 billion nodes on the blockchain. So, they all should be able to go and look at the records. So, can blockchain handle those numbers? And that's going to be a very difficult design problem. Remember, it is complex. So, spreading complexity, complex systems are not necessarily scalable. So, one more drawback. So, if the numbers are huge, may not be as easy to implement. Conceptually it is very clean, we know it is possible, it brings the benefit. Implementation would be an issue. And the next one, blockchain, given the nature that it is distributed and runs on the internet or any network for that matter, a private network need not run on the internet, it can run on a private network, but that network has to be robust, that is, transmission has to happen, enormous amount of data has to be transmitted faithfully without anyone compromising it, data being lost or corrupted. So, it would require a robust high performance network. So, if this is not available, blockchain will not be, for it to, even the basic blockchain would require a high bandwidth. For the example, we have seen the example of Estonia. Before it reached the level where it could put all its government services on a blockchain, an enormous amount of effort had gone in. Everybody had been given a digital certificate, and Estonia has one of the highest broadband connection rates in the world, highest capabilities in the world. So, all this basic infrastructure is a requirement. If the infrastructure is not there, blockchain is not a good solution. And next, establishing identity, or more importantly the pseudonymity. First of all, how do we establish identity on a blockchain? Very typically I might use a certificate, or I may use it biometrics. Even when I use that, it is not necessary to link that identity to me in person. How do I change my name? How do I add a surname? All these are issues with establishing identity on a blockchain. More importantly, this characteristic where a certificate or a login username need not be linked to a person who claims that to be. Somebody else may claim to be Sudhendar Hanumantha and get a certificate issued. Many of these companies which issue PKI certificates today, they do not have that level of KYC that they can ensure that that certificate is issued to this Sudhendar Hanumantha only. What about certificates issued to corporations? They can easily change, corporations can come and corporations can go. What happens to this identity? So, in all these cases, where established identity has to be very strictly established and with all its capabilities, and then we have this feature of immutability. Once an identity has been established, cannot be changed. So, how do we handle that? In those issues again, establishing identity is a positive as well as a drawback of the system, and pseudonymity, where any entity, all the transactions by an entity can be traced to an entity, but not necessarily to a person operating that entity, is one of the big drawbacks. And in some of the previous lectures we saw that this is one of the reasons why many regulatory authorities are hesitant to give legitimacy to cryptocurrencies. And then from the some of the frauds we have seen, whether it is smart contract or wallet, wherever blockchains interface with non-blockchain systems, designing that interface is quite a challenge. We have to make it in such a way that they can be compromised easily, and based on various instances we are seeing, much of the frauds and scams are all happening there at the interface level. So, defining a smart contract, for example, smart contracts once defined cannot be amended, they can only be cancelled and new one built. We cannot amend a smart contract, and the moment the terms of smart contract have happened, we cannot stop it from firing. So, normally a good feature, but can also be a drawback in certain situations. And lastly, some of the blockchains, especially those which are based on the proof of work algorithm, have been accused of being very wasteful. It is a fairly well known fact that in some of these big mining farms in countries like Canada, China and all, are consuming so much power as to be sufficient to power an entire city. So, that is the kind of power that each mining farm is consuming for what? For generating a cryptocurrency, highly wasteful by itself. And not only that, a block in any proof of work algorithm like Bitcoin, a block might be mined by 10 people consuming the same amount of power, enormous amount of power 10 times, but only one of them will go into the blockchain, the other 9 will get discarded. So, all the power consumed, all the computing used gets wasted. So, if 10 blocks are mined, only 10% is useful, 90% get wasted. In many cases it would be more than that. So, blockchains have been accused of being highly damaging to the environment depending on how the power has been generated, and highly wasteful. New criticisms of blockchains are still evolving. Many of them focusing, some of them do focus on the attacks and frauds, measures are there to take care of them. Some of these criticisms are more difficult to solve or address. So, but my point in bringing all this up together is to present a picture that yes, there is all these good things, but let us also be aware of these bad things, not so good things. So, when we take a conscious decision to leverage a blockchain for any problem we have, as a solution to anything we do, as the idea of a new product for a new company, whatever it is, let us be very clear that why we are choosing the blockchain. We need to choose the blockchain for the strengths it offers, which should be our requirement, and we should also be mindful of the fact that there are these characteristics, these possibilities that it will be compromised, and we may have to take measures. The measures may not be on the blockchain. For example, if somebody steals keys from a wallet, the blockchain can do nothing about it. How do we address that? We have to put in place policies, for example, or robust mechanisms with law enforcement. The moment we find that somebody has walked away with the keys, we should be able to put a complaint and get it registered. Many countries, especially in the developing world, their rules are still not been evolved to handle this kind of cyber crimes. So, work towards improving those cyber crimes so that they are treated with urgency as any financial crime elsewhere. So, that is my purpose in representing. However, none of these drawbacks, potential attacks and all should stop us from leveraging what is truly a groundbreaking technology. It has proven to be a game changer. It has been proven to be a disruptive technology in so many areas, which could bring significant benefits to all of us. Just a small note of caution, not to sound too negative. That was the purpose of today's lecture today. And now we are almost there. Those of you who have gone through these 10 sessions must be feeling like that, my goodness, so much. So, we are almost at the end. So, before we finish, let us do a brief recap. In the first lecture, we looked at the introduction, blockchain. What is a blockchain? what is its importance, what gives its importance, what are the some simple applications, preliminary applications we looked at. And since blockchain heavily depends on cryptography and won't exist without cryptography, we briefly looked at cryptography itself, some basic concepts, and what are those concepts that are applicable to blockchain. In the third session, we looked at types of blockchain, types by ownership, public, private, permissioned, permissionless, types of maintenance or consensus, proof of work, proof of stake, and then we looked at smart contracts, one of the key killer applications which makes blockchain truly useful in the outside business world other than cryptocurrency. So, smart contracts are this addition to blockchain, and we looked at what is a smart contract, how do we implement them, where do we apply them, where we need an automatic execution based on conditions being met. In the fifth session, we looked at cryptocurrencies, the biggest users of blockchain. We saw the role of blockchain in cryptocurrencies. Most cryptocurrencies are built on top of a blockchain, because blockchain at heart is a ledger. So, that is the best application for currency as such. We looked at cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Ripple, most important. Next session, we looked at some ways, some tools we have, some methods we have to go about developing a blockchain, some of the characteristics and the comparison of various platforms that are available to develop the blockchain. So, we looked at what is a development platform, what are the most popular platforms for blockchain, what are their characteristics, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and their applicable areas. Next two sessions, we looked at use cases where blockchain can be used, has been used, and looked at examples. In the first session, we looked at from auto maintenance, logistics, ensuring food safety, and crowdfunding. Now, remember the example of crowdfunding a movie, that is from this session. We also looked at blockchain, how it is being used in public sector, in governance and various other activities. We looked at how it can be used for managing governance and democracy and voting, how to maintain identities, how it has been applied in agriculture, and how to even manage aid, make sure that aid reaches the intended beneficiaries. We looked at all these applications of blockchain in public sector. Then the order is slightly reversed. In one of the earlier sessions, we also looked at blockchain in India. We looked at what are the areas of applicability in blockchain in India, what are the efforts of RBI for about blockchain in India, and especially we looked at the recent policies for setting up a sandbox, regulatory sandbox, so that blockchain initiatives can be tested safely in the real world with minimal consequences if they are bad, and if they are good, gives us data to enroll them across the country with any intended changes in policy. We also looked at a small pilot project done by RBI which showed how blockchain can be used to compress the process required for a letter of credit and various other banking activities. And in session today, we looked at risks and threats to blockchain, some potential attacks like loss of keys, some examples of fraud that have happened, possibilities of fraud, and some real life examples, and certain drawbacks which have happened on the blockchain. So, after all this, I hope all of you have a good idea of blockchain. This course was oriented mainly as business graduates, but others also can probably use this. We should be able to see what a blockchain is, where it is helpful. So, depending on whatever our area of activity is, we should be able to get a start, say okay, this is how we start, these are what we know, and do more research and leverage. As I said, this can be truly groundbreaking. Not all technologies can be so groundbreaking or game changing or disruptive by nature, but here is one, and it may result in significant benefits with certain attendant risks also along with that. So, thank you for bearing with me. Good luck.